Hello, and welcome to today's webinar for our Intelligence for Admin series. My name is Kimberly. I will be here with Matt Kruzecki today, and we will go through some common examples for troubleshooting application scripts and some of the common errors that we see. So just to go through a couple housekeeping items here, we do have everyone in listen-only mode. Feel free, please do actually submit questions into our chat window as well. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a follow-up with the recording and let you have access to replay it. So moving on to today's presenter is going to be our implementation engineer, Matt Kruzecki. He's been with TrackVia for a while here on our technical solutions team, and he is kind of our in-house guru for our application scripts. If you haven't worked with him and have used app scripts, I promise he's probably touched your account in some way, shape, or form and helped us fix something. But yeah, he's our awesome guru, our great resource to have here. So today we're going to go over a couple different things, some of the most common application errors or app script errors that we have, the different types. Matt's going to give us a demo, and then we'll open the floor for questions and close it up there. So I guess first off, we kind of missed the slide for what are application scripts. Application scripts are a programming language in Groovy, which kind of run behind the scenes of all of your TrackVia functions, your tables, your apps, and they kind of help us hack formulas and make things run a little bit smoother and a little bit more efficient on the back end. Kind of help speed things up, and they can do some pretty powerful things. So I'll leave that up to Matt to kind of show some examples here. So kind of get started here, the two main types of application errors are going to be classified under compilation or runtime errors. So in this first list here, we have the compilation errors. Compilation errors are errors that surface when the system is trying to load a script and encounters a problem that prevents it from finishing to load, whether that be a syntax problem. It's one of the most common reasons, mistakes in just how the code was written in general. So some of the most common errors that you'll see here are going to be syntax, such as missing a comma, a parenthesis, a bracket, misspelling. I think we all typo every now and then, so misspelling is very common that we see as well. Data type mismatch, so you'll want to make sure that you're not trying to put text into a date field. Another thing that I think people overlook a lot is case sensitivity. So field names, table names, they are case sensitive. And the last one is trying to reference a Groovy function that is just not been allowed on our server at all. So we have seen a few of those come up. And then the other type of errors that we see are kind of classified as a runtime error. A runtime error is basically something where the script has compiled, didn't see any errors in the actual code, but when it tries to execute the code, it encounters a problem. So some of the more common things that we see in these types of errors are going to be maybe you're referencing a field name that has been deleted from the table, just never existed, or a relationship was incorrectly established or is missing incorrectly named tables and relationships. They can also encounter a timeout. I'm sure that we've had a lot of people call in and ask us to increase that timeout limit, so some of you may be familiar with that. Duplicate table names or records, that's a big one as well. If you have multiple applications in your account and maybe they serve two different purposes, but they might have similar table names like a customer table or a contacts table. We see a lot of duplicate table names or records. data type mismatch as well. And then sometimes just kind of lacks the error altogether and takes a little bit more deep diving into it. And that's usually when we call Matt in. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Matt and let him show you some of the common examples and how to troubleshoot them.
Thanks, Kim. Yes, so we're going to talk through a handful of what Kim just explained today. So I have kind of pre-created a bunch of scenarios that will cause errors, and then we'll talk about how to kind of diagnose those errors. And so some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with many of these errors, and so both on a compilation side as well as a runtime side. So I'm going to kind of intersperse, the order of this. I'm not necessarily going to stick with just compilation errors and just runtime errors. I just have kind of a full laundry list of different types of errors that you might encounter. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep this really simple. Again, this isn't really a session on how to write app scripts. It's more on troubleshooting app scripts that have been written and just cause errors, right? So we're going to try to focus more on the error than we are on what the actual code is doing. That said, I've tried to keep this very simple, but some cases do obviously require a little bit more involved scripting. Okay. So I've only got 2 tables in this app. So again, super basic. We have a parents table and a children table. And for purposes of the demo, I just have the 2 different views on here. And we're going to be doing things to these different tables. And we're going to show you how the app scripts are running or maybe failing to run. So the first app script that we're going to work through is actually going to be, I'm going to go to the parents table, and we're going to run an app script that is a before insert script. And the purpose of this script is to grab the full name, which is a trigger or a triggered field, and we're going to stamp that name into a unique name field to prevent duplicates. And the reason why we're doing this, right, is we can't create a unique value at the table level on a trigger. So I'm taking the value from the trigger, I'm stamping it into a single line field, and then that single line field is what I can make unique at the table level so that I'm preventing duplicates from being added, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and enable this. All it's doing is it's taking the current value of the full name and setting the unique name equal to that value. I'm gonna run this script. First, I'll enable it. Then I'm gonna go back here, and on the parents table, I'm gonna run this script or create a new parent, and we'll see that the full name, which is my trigger, does in fact say Matt Cruz, but the unique name did not get stamped, right? So this is one of those common scenarios where it's like, I don't get it, I've tried everything, this is super basic, it doesn't make any sense. So this particular instance actually involves the trigger event type. Because app scripts are actually, because triggers are calculated after the apps or after the app script, the insert script, before insert, sorry, we actually would need to change this to an after insert, right? So the trigger is not, this value is not set when the before insert script has run. So if we change the trigger to an after insert script, then it will work. And so what we can do very simply here is go in, change this to an after insert, save this script, we'll go back, we'll try another record, and what we should see is this working. And it does. So just keep in mind that if you are referencing triggered fields in an app script, especially on the insert side, you would need to use an after insert if you're referencing that, because there is no value on a before insert in that trigger yet, okay? Moving on to the next one, we are going to look at a script that involves checkboxes. We commonly get asked the question, I don't understand why I'm getting an error on a checkbox when using a contains function. So this is kind of an example of hey, I have a checkbox, and we create a list variable for checkboxes because a checkbox is an array, right? It can contain multiple options in a checkbox. So we create that list. And in this particular script, I'm saying if there's a value in the activities, which is the checkbox field, I'm basically setting my list equal to the values in that activities checkbox. I have a logger here to help us diagnose the problem, but ultimately what I want to do is I want to say if that activities checkbox contains reading, I'm going to output reading is checked in my logger, which I will be able to see here in my error log. So what you're going to see here is if I go back to my parents, and I'll just operate from this view, and I'm going to go in here, I'll check reading. We'll come back to this. We'll see reading and reading is checked. I go back here, I uncheck reading, and all of a sudden I get this error, and I don't understand, right? So this error says cannot invoke method contains on null object. So I'm sure if those of you who've written app scripts working with checkboxes, this probably has come up. And this is a tough one to diagnose sometimes because I don't understand what does this even mean. And again, this particular case can be solved with two simple fixes, or either or, two different fixes. The first one is making sure that your list is always set to an empty list so that there will always be a value to look at. So if I save this, again, all I've done is set my list equal to an empty list, and I uncheck this box. I no longer have a problem because, again, I'm not looking at a null object, right? Without defining activities with some value, this being an empty list value, it doesn't know how to execute that particular function, okay? The other option, which is just as good, is enforcing that activities exist first and then also contains reading. So first I want to make sure that there is something in activities, which is my list variable, and then I want to see if it contains reading. And if I save this and I go through the same exercise and I check reading, I check reading, and then I uncheck reading, I don't see that same error, okay? So just something to be aware of with checkboxes, or really any list or list map variable that you're setting. Either default it to an empty list or list map, or enforce an additional condition in your if statement to validate whether something does exist there or not. And then last but not least, on the parents table, we have a bunch of script errors on the children table. Last but not least, on the parents table, I am going to enable this script. And this script looks like it's doing a lot of fancy stuff. What it's doing is it's basically looking at the value plugged in the field called create number of children to create. So if there's a value in number of children to create, I'm grabbing that value, creating a variable that's an integer, and then basically I'm going to create a child counter and loop over that child counter and continue creating child records until I've created all of them specified in my number of children to create. So what I'm doing is basically saying, child counter set to 0, while child counter is less than that number I input, create a map, which is basically establishing the values I'm plugging into that child record, and then saving that child record, and then incrementing that child counter by 1. And so it's just going to keep running over this, and then ultimately I'm going to null that value out. If I activate this script and I come back to this table and I want to go in here and set 1,000 children to create, and I save this, it's going to run, and it actually worked perfectly fine, which is surprising because I was expecting that to error out. So let's try 5,000. And there's the error I was expecting to see. There wasn't enough time to execute that script, and you're going to see a timeout issue down here. So it's stating that there's an issue with the after update on the parents table. The app script timed out. The maximum execution time of 2,000 milliseconds was exceeded. If you find yourself in this situation, outside of potentially trying to improve the performance of your app script, maybe you're doing extraneous things that you don't need to. In this case, I don't have another solution to fix the script as it's written, or do another way, build the script a different way to get around this. This particular error requires a call or email into our support team, or if you're working with an implementation engineer, obviously talking to them. This is actually a default that is set on all new app scripts, and the default is 2 seconds. We have the ability on our support team and the implementation team to increase the app script timeout to up to 59 seconds. So obviously a large jump from 2 seconds. Now that said, I have encountered many instances where 59 seconds is not enough time, and then we have to consider breaking down what's all happening, maybe segmenting it into different trigger events, maybe looking at integration tools or microservices, because essentially what's happening is there's just too much happening in that script for it to execute in under the 59 seconds. And this is a limit that is just set hard and fast. There's nothing we can do to get beyond the 59 seconds. So that's kind of the limitation we're up against there. So again, I would go into this account, go into this particular app script in our support UI area, update this, which I can certainly do, but I don't even know where that window went. And it would be able to execute. Obviously, you saw 1,000 records got executed under 2 seconds. I would likely probably increase the timeout of this to maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. Typically, we don't like to go wild and just throw it at 59 if it's not necessary. Because again, that spinner is going to stay up on the screen for that long of a period of time in order for it to finish. And we don't want to continue building and building and building, because ultimately we want to have that wiggle room to expand if we need to expand. So we're not going to just necessarily throw you at 59 right off the bat. But again, this would require a call into support or to your implementation engineer. Okay, so those were a couple errors that we saw on the parents table. Now I'm going to shift over to work on some scripts on my children table. So we're going to go over into the children table and look at those. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to activate this script. I'm going to enable it. And this particular script is basically saying if there is a parent and the parent has a last name, so this is a parent relationship, meaning if I create a child, I'm an insert script, and I create it with a parent attached, a relationship, and the parent has a last name, I want to update the child's last name equal to that parent's last name, right? I click save on this, and this is an instance where we're running into a compilation error, okay? A compilation error, again, is one that you're going to see with the red kind of toaster that pops up at the bottom. This basically means there's something wrong with the syntax of the script itself. So it's not necessarily that we can go and test the script yet, because the script hasn't even saved, right? And in this particular instance, you're going to see the error message calling out that it's expecting a closure parenthesis. The interesting thing about this error, though, which can be misleading and sometimes hard to actually find where that closure parenthesis belongs, is it actually says the problem is in line 7, right? Line 7 doesn't even exist. So I know that that's not where I'm missing a parenthesis. The problem here is that it's not going to know where you're trying to enclose, your statement. It doesn't know. It's not smart enough to know what you're trying to do with that app script. And so therefore, it is not going to point you to the problem. Now I know where the problem is because I can look at the if statement, and that's typically where your parentheses are going to live, right? You're basically enclosing what your if condition is. And in this particular instance, my if statement does not have a closure parenthesis. And so if I add that closure parenthesis, I click save, voila, it saves, and I can expect that this script would work, right? I'm not going to go in and test the script. I actually have more examples of errors that revolve around this same type of logic. So we're going to move on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my next block of code and just overwrite this. And we're going to activate this block of code and take a look at the error here. Also interesting that I just got a compilation error. Wasn't even meant to actually bring that in, but why not talk about it? Constructor call must be the first statement in a constructor. This one actually does call out line 2, column 68. Again, what the problem here is, this was my commented piece that essentially defines what the objective is for this script. I commented in that full block of code. This actually should not have been commented in. I save it and I get a save to occur. So now we're going to focus on what the actual error is here. So in this particular case, again, I'm doing the same thing. If there's a parent relationship and the parent has a last name, populate the child's last name with the parent's last name. So what you're going to see here is that in this particular example, it saved fine. So now we're going to go in and test it, right? So essentially, again, if I have a parent relationship, I'm basically taking the last name and stamping it into that child that I'm creating. So I come down here, I add a new child, and we'll just call this test. And I'm not going to set the last name. If I did set the last name, it potentially, it would overwrite it, right, with the parent's last name. So I click this, I click save, nothing populates. What went wrong? So this is a little bit trickier, right? There's no compilation error. The script just didn't work as I was expecting it to. So where do I start? In this particular case, I'd actually probably start to make sure that I'm getting inside my if statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a logger, and the logger simply just letting me know, hey, I got in. And so we're going to try this again. Now that I have a logger, we'll see if it actually does log the activity. We go here, click save, and we have no last name. I go to my error log, and I got in. Well, that's good news. So I know my if condition is fine. It validated that I do have a parent relationship and that my parent has a last name. Well, what's going on then? Let me maybe do another logger, and this logger actually gives me more detail. So the first one just said I got in. Now I'm actually interested in finding what values I'm getting here. So this is just hard text with a colon, a space, and then what I'm doing is I'm concatenating the parent's last name and defining it as a string. And so the error log output should give me what this value is. And so we'll run this again. I go back to my error log. I got in, parent last name is Cruz. Okay, what is going on here? I don't understand. How can this not work? So I know that the first line is right. I'm getting into my loggers. I'm getting the right last name. Now I can evaluate this last statement. This last statement says current values last name. Oh, there's my problem. I have a double equal sign. A double equal sign is evaluating whether what's on the left-hand side equals the right-hand side. That is not actually what I'm trying to do with this script. I'm trying to set the value on the left side equal to the value on the right side, right? And if I'm trying to do that, I would use a single equal sign. So I'm going to comment out these loggers because we don't need them anymore. And I'm going to save the script with a single equal sign. I'm going to go back and run another test. adding another child, and voila, problem solved, okay? So again, sometimes it can be just an operator issue. It's not necessarily going to throw a compilation error because it doesn't see anything wrong with your code, but it also isn't smart enough to know exactly what you're trying to do with your code. So sometimes it is it not giving you an error at all, but it's not actually executing what you were hoping it to do. And so those are probably the most difficult to diagnose. But what I would encourage you to do is use loggers and continue to kind of go down the code, logging each step of the way to see where it's falling apart, where something isn't set up properly. Okay. All right, so the next one we're going to look at is, I'm gonna go in here, we're gonna update this, we're gonna comment everything in, but not the top. Same thing, same script, doing the same exact thing. If there's a parent relationship, the parent has a last name, we're gonna set the current values of last name equal to the parent's last name. We're gonna save this code, should work, shouldn't have any errors, no problem whatsoever. So I come in here, I save and add new, test 5, click save, and I get a yellow toaster pop up on me. This toaster says it's an issue on the children before insert script, which is the one I'm working with right now. It cannot add a value for an unknown field last name. Well, in this case, this is actually really helpful, and it's really easy to figure out what the problem is. Unknown field last name. I come back in here, I look at my script, I see last name, lowercase n. Okay, there's my problem. Case sensitivity. You will see on the children table, the value I'm trying to set, last name, n is capitalized, but I have it lowercase in my code, and therefore it caused that error. Now I just updated that. I click save, and I have the last name populated. Code executes as expected. So again, case sensitivity, important to pay attention to that. One area I might suggest, and I know we're not doing much of this in constants, AppScript constants, hopefully you're familiar with, kind of reduces the fragility of app scripts because you can change field names. We're not, constants is not looking at a field name with the quotes around it. It's actually looking at the underlying field ID. So again, if you were, worrying about case sensitivity, you're worrying about changing field names with your code breaking, AppScript constants kind of resolves that problem for you. The reason why we do a lot of these webinars not in AppScript constants is because not everyone's familiar with it, and it's actually a little bit easier to see the field names that I'm referencing in text, right? Or in quotes, I should say. There will be some errors that I do demonstrate in constants in a bit. Before we jump into that, I have one more AppScript error I want to show you here, and that is this guy right here. This particular script is a pretty common script we use that will set a relationship based on a common attribute from a child to a parent. So in this particular script, if this child record on creation has a last name, I want to go to the parent table, search for the same last name in the last name field on the parent table. And if I find one, I'm going to go and set the relationship from my child record, the record I'm on, to that parent. Okay, pretty simple. So first I'm saying I want to validate that the child has a last name, and then I'm going to go do a load record, which goes to the parents table, looks at the last name field, and looks for the match of the current value's last name. And if it finds that record, I'm setting the current values of my parent relationship equal to that parent lookup that I defined up here as my map. So we're going to go in and we're going to test this out. I come back here, I'm on my child table. Again, I add a child. I am going to link it to Jane Doe. I'm going to click, I'm going to obviously put Doe in here. I'm not looking to set my parent because I'm trying to let the app script do that for me. So I want this to automatically go and set a record or this parent relationship. I click save and I run into another yellow toaster or orange toaster that says before insert failed, query did not return a unique result to. Okay, well, it did not return a unique result. So first thing I'm thinking is, well, my load record is looking for one unique record because I can only set a single parent relationship, right? It's a child to one parent, and I'm looking for Doe. Well, let me go check out the parents table, right? So I go here, I check out the parents table, and voila, I notice there are 2 records that have a last name of Doe. That's a problem. How is the system supposed to know which parent relationship to set it to, Jane or John? So this is a particular situation where there may be different solutions to the problem. Obviously, if I do want to set it to a particular parent, I need to specify clearer criteria. But obviously, I may not have that criteria in here, right? So this particular problem could be just a problem with how the data structure is set up with respect to the fields that I have available to me. But let's say if I had at a minimum the last name and the parent's date of birth, I could search by those 2 criteria in my load record. And if I do that, I now know that I should be able to dwindle that list down to one and only one parent, whereas right now I don't have that ability, and therefore the system can't allocate or assign a relationship to a parent because there are 2 parents with the last name of Doe, right? So again, something to be aware of. I'm not proposing a solution because there may be multiple solutions here, but the underlying problem is it can't find a unique record. That is what a load record function does, is it looks for a unique record based on the parameters you specified in that load record. And when it doesn't find a unique record, obviously that's the error that you're going to get. Okay, the next couple are actually going to involve AppScript constants. So I'm going to bring in my AppScript constants here, and we'll show you a couple issues that I'll run into with that. AppScript constants, right? Hopefully everyone is aware of this. If you're new to AppScripts, maybe you're not. AppScript constants basically allows us to grab the underlying field ID for the different fields, tables, relationships, etc., from this right-hand panel. So as an example, on the parents table, I can expand this list. I can look, this parents table has an underlying ID of 243. That's why you see that over here. We use the copy or the clipboard, and then we just paste it. And that way we can just use these variables in our code. So if someone went in to change the parents table to parents, master parents table, the code still works, doesn't break. Whereas if I hard coded parents and I changed it to master parents, obviously it's going to break because it's looking for that actual text. Whereas this is looking for the underlying IDs. These are just variable names. This particular case, what you're going to see here is an issue with a compilation situation. The current scope already contains a variable of the name last name. What you're going to see here is I have a last name on the parents table. I have a last name on the child table. If you try to bring both of those over, here's the last name 3242, here's last name 3252. These are 2 different fields, but the variable names that are defaulted simply just take the text and camel case it. Now I have 2 names or 2 variables with the same name. Obviously, how are we going to know which one to reference in the code with 2 of the same? So what you can do in this particular case is we could preface this with a P for parent, this with a C for child. Again, these are just variable names. You can make changes to them. Then we would update the code. This would be C, this would be P, this would be P. I click save. I no longer have that problem. And rest assured, this script will work. Again, same script we've been running since the beginning. If there's a parent relationship, we are basically setting the last name of the parent to equal, or sorry, grabbing the last name of the parent and stamping it into the last name of the child. So now you can see that my script does in fact work. We'll do one more example of a compilation error, or not a compilation error, of an constants error. So we'll copy this over. In this particular case, again, doing the same exact thing as we've always been doing. I save this, I get an error. The error here, compilation error, 2 ampersands, didn't even plan that. Glad it popped up, not the error I was focusing on. I take those 2 out. No compilation error. I'll try to run the script. The example is the exact same. Again, create a name, grab a parent, click save, and I get an orange toaster, unknown or missing property null. That's going to be a fun one. This is going to arise with AppScript constants when you are not using the proper constants, meaning the underlying field IDs are not accurate. Now, in this particular case, I would first want to validate that all of these are correct. And again, I do that from over here, parents table, right? 243, last name for the parent, 3242, and so on and so forth. Now, in this particular case, I know all of these are correct. The actual underlying problem here is a very common problem people run into, and that is using the wrong relationship field, okay? You're gonna see here in the children table, I have a relationship section with a field 1046. I have a parent in the fields section that when hovering over it says relationship, and that integer ID is 3260. Which one do I use? Well, in 90+% of the case, this is actually the field that you're going to use, but the easiest way to really think about it that I've come up with is if I'm looking upstream, this is the field I want to use. If I'm looking downstream, this is the field I want to use. So specifically, the only time that I'd use this relationship field is when I'm doing an add child or get children. Otherwise, this will always be the relationship field you want to use. I typically call this the relationship, and this is the relationship ID. You can see here that that's how I name this. I always append relx or relx ID. In this particular case, my code is using this relationship, which is the wrong relationship field. And so if I simply take the ID off to then use this field, I save the script, I go and run my new example, and no toaster, and the last name is set. Again, very, very common error that I see, and it's just a misunderstanding of which relationship field to use. So hopefully you've taken something from one of these errors and maybe have encountered many of these errors and can take it, run with it, learn from it, and use it. So if the next time you do have an error in your own account, you have this webinar to reference, and or you can certainly call in to our support team and they can help you diagnose those problems as well. So with that, I think, Kim, I'll pass it back to you. Questions? I'm not sure if you guys have been monitoring the queue, but happy to answer any questions that you guys have at this time.
Yeah, I can. I'll give you the easy one first. What's the shortcut key that you use to comment out and uncomment the code real quickly?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I use a Mac, and honestly, I always get this confused for Windows. So I don't know, Kim, you might know this better than me, but yes, commenting code in and out can be done in bulk simply by highlighting the code. And on a Mac, at least, it's the command slash, and I always get the forward and back mixed up, but it's the one with the question mark. So basically, it's, yeah, commenting code that is highlighted either in or out. The other nice thing about this is you don't actually have to highlight the whole line. If you're looking to just comment one line in, you can be anywhere in that line and comment it in and out. You don't actually have to highlight the line. Now, if you're doing bulk, right, you would want to comment or highlight the bulk amount that you want in or out, and then use the command slash key. And I think maybe with Windows, it might be like, I don't know, control command or something. But yes, play around with that and you'll figure it out, I'm sure, if you're on a Windows. It's not much different, but I think it does involve one more key.
Thank you. So let's see here. Another question that we got is the timeout value for the entire database, or is it set for each different script?
Yes, good question. It is per script. So again, if we're looking at this insert script would be a script that would have a timeout associated with it. This before update script would have a timeout that is associated with it. So it's anything that is written in the script editor under a specific script that would have that defaulted 2-second timeout that can be increased if necessary.
And then this one came in at your very first example, Matt. So if you go back to your main dash, it was the very first example where you needed to change it to an after insert to be based off of the triggered field. So the question is, once you fix the script, how do you go back and fix the other records?
Great question. Lots of different options here, but to say at a minimum, what's going to be needed is this script now would need to be an update script as well, right? Obviously, the insert script is only going to take effect when you're creating a new record. And so what you could do, and I can actually show you this, is if we go to an update script, and in this example, before or after update doesn't really matter because again, we're not impacting a triggered value at the time of the script executing. We're just taking what's there already. So either one works in that particular case. I'll just comment this out. We'll add this in. And again, so this is going to execute as long as there is a full name. We'll go into the parents table. You're going to see full name here. You're going to see the unique name is not populated on those three. So whether you do, and of course it requires an update of some sort. And so I'm just going to update. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll add like a single line field temporarily so I can put a 1 in it or something like that, and then delete that single line field. It's really just to serve the purpose of causing an update to the record, which fires the script. In this case, I could actually even use the unique name. Well, I can't because it's a unique field, but I guess I could if it wasn't a unique field because it's going to overwrite that unique name. In this case, I'll just set the activity of all of them to sports, right? And then what you're going to see is all of those unique names now populated, right? Because it's an update script, it's looking at the full name and it's taking the full name and stamping it into the unique name. So that's how you would essentially execute that after the fact if needed. And in these instances, I actually build a lot more logic around this just for performance reasons. I don't want that update script executing every time I make an update. So even though I probably would build this script on an insert and an update, my update script would probably have more conditions around it such that it will say if full name or if current value's full name does not equal previous value's full name, then execute the code, because I don't need the code executed every time. It's just overwriting what was already there, right? So I build more conditions around the update side of it, but I do typically have both an insert and an update, because what happens when someone goes in and changes the name, right? I would want that unique name updated. And in this case, it's executing it. Now, again, if I made another update to date of birth, I'm not even touching the full name, or the full name. The script technically is still still executing and overwriting this value, right? So, trying to build your scripts efficiently and causing them to execute when they should be executing, not all the time, right? Because it's not needed all the time. It's only needed when the full name changes.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so I think you kind of touched base on this one, but we'll circle back just to make sure we covered everything. So what if you have a long app script, you're getting a null value error, you try to use the logger, but the logger doesn't save. So how do you find where the problem is?
Yeah, that's fun. And I've had my fair share of these too. Obviously, it's a pretty painful process. One of the things that we'll actually point out, I think, in the key takeaways is loggers help diagnose parts of your code, and they certainly can be used, but something like a null value, how you break that down is you actually have to comment out parts of your code and keep executing pieces of the code, right? So that you'll find where the actual problem is occurring. And so if I have a code that's 1,000 lines long, chances are it's not one code operating on one condition. It's this is set to do this, that's set to do this, right? I have multiple different scripts that I have embedded in there based on different conditions. So I would just start with the top one, comment out the rest of my code, try to execute it. Am I getting the error? I'm not, okay? Then I can comment in the next piece, execute. Am I getting the error? Comment in the next piece. Am I getting the error? And that's typically how I would break down that process. Again, with the null errors, they may be your code base, but they also may be your variables if you're using constants. It may be referencing an underlying field ID that no longer exists, or maybe you deleted a field and added it back, but didn't update the constant ID. You're going to get one of those errors then too, right? So it's kind of validating all the constants if you're using abstract constants. If you're not, then again, you're going to have to basically start commenting out sections of your code to find where that actual problem is, and then you'll be able to diagnose the problem much easier that way.
So I think that looks like all of the questions that we have. We did have one more so related to how to write a specific type of script. Since we're kind of focused on errors here, we'll follow up on that independently. So appreciate that. Any other questions before we wrap up here?
Going once, twice. Okay. All right, okay. So key takeaways. 2 types of errors, compilation and runtime. So the compilation, we said, again, are kind of the red toasters that pop up at the bottom. There's something wrong with the syntax, has nothing to do with what you're trying or what you're expecting as far as an outcome. It literally just doesn't like the groovy code that you've written. And so you have to find where the problem is, obviously fix it. Once you do fix it, doesn't mean your app script's going to do exactly what you want it to do, right? But a compilation error is the red toaster, something wrong with how the code was written, whereas the runtime is the code saved fine, but it's not performing the way you expect it to, either by not giving you an error, but not giving you the result you're expecting, or more likely, causing a orange/yellow toaster to pop up, which in most cases is fairly helpful for you to diagnose where the problem actually is stemming from. Compilation errors give you a general idea of where the issue lies. Again, that's not always true. We saw, like with the closure, it's going to basically take you to the last line of your code because it's expecting a closure. It doesn't know where it should go, right? So in this instance, this is where you'd evaluate your if conditions. One of your if conditions likely is missing that closure parenthesis. Using logger.info, you saw a couple instances where I use that today that will show up in the error log. So, trying to evaluate whether or not it's getting inside your if condition by putting a logger saying got in. Maybe you're trying to figure out what the actual value is of a field. And so you can actually define and create a logger that has the value that is, that the code is using, or that the code is, ultimately going to spit out, right? And so I showed you examples of 2 of those. Loggers are extremely helpful for diagnosing, typically where you're not getting an error, there's no toaster, but you're not getting the result that you're expecting, right? And so breaking that down using loggers is a super helpful tool. Using the commenting feature to find where the issue is, right? This was the last question I think we just talked about. You have this huge long app script with lots of different code in it. Where do I even begin, right? Well, you got to start somewhere. So let's just start with the first block of code. Let's comment out everything else to rule that out. And then going down that line until basically you see that error pop back up, then you can evaluate the block of code that, is causing that error. Double-click closures. So that is something I actually didn't show you. So I'm going to show you that really quick. This, again, kind of relates to the compilation error, right? If I am anywhere in my code block and I'm looking to see where the closure ends, I can simply double-click behind my closures and it'll show me where it ends. Similar, I can do that with my brackets. Right? Where does everything that's contained within this bracket's going to get highlighted, right? So I can have, extra code down here. If I double click here, it's going to stop with this bracket. This is super helpful to understand, hey, here's my if condition. What all is getting executed if I get inside that statement? Especially when you have really large scripts. This is really helpful. And again, it works both for your parentheses as well as your brackets. All good stuff. All right. So I think those were some of the big key takeaways we had. And I think this is on to Kim.
Yep. So just wrapping things up here. So we do have some additional resources, and I thought I just updated that, but I did that in the wrong doc. So that I apologize. That link is actually incorrect for app scripts. You can go to developer.trackvia.com, and you can click on. There's a little button there for app scripts that will give you some additional information and some examples. As you know, our support team is available, so you can email, you can call someone. There to assist you. If you want a little bit more hands-on or feel a little bit intimidated with some of these, like I do, then you always have the option to use our professional services. So we have premium support, service packages, custom development. So those are always options as well that your account manager can talk with you about. Lastly, we'll send you we'll send you the recording of this webinar within the next 2 days. And at the end of this, we will have a quick little survey that we would love for you to fill out and give us any feedback and ask. And I would appreciate any other subjects you'd like to hear about in the future. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, we will see you later.